People really like to dunk on Sonic's quote-unquote dark age. Sonic games were all bad and hideous and we should all act like that'll never happen. Yeah, that was a thing. Well, I don't agree, but that's not the point. I'm sorry, do I ramble too much at the beginning of videos? Okay, today I want to talk about the Sonic games that have multiple campaigns. Like, yeah, let's say we have a Pokemon game. Yeah, because those don't already exist. Well, instead of letting you play as either a boy or a girl, you're meant to play as both of them. You choose whose story you want to play first. And when you finish that character's story, the game isn't over. You still have to play the other character's story. And when you finish that, you can finally play a shorter final chapter that wraps up the events of the two stories you've been playing. Does that make sense? Is it too confusing? Okay, it's like watching different Marvel movies to understand an Avengers movie. Ah, now you get it! Most of the modern Sonic games and Sonic Adventure followed this trend. It seemed to be the norm at the time, and it allowed the games to last a little longer than they would have otherwise. But the first instance of something like this happening was during Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Knuckles' story happens after Sonic's story here. It consists in a second attack from Eggman's robots towards Angel Island to try to take the Master Emerald by force. And it allowed you to reach parts of the levels that Sonic and Tails cannot. So they're reusing assets they use in the main campaign to create different levels out of nowhere. Except they're not different levels. It's just that all the levels are gigantic and you get to explore different parts of them with Knuckles. It's super cohesive. And it's gratifying to discover these new parts of the levels you've already played. But oh my god, Sonic Team really wanted to tell stories with the games and characters they had at their disposal. They loved the world they had created, and when they made Sonic Adventure, they wanted to show us how cool that world truly was. They wanted us to discover that world from different points of view. All of the stories you're told take place because of the same reason. Chaos, the god of destruction, has been unleashed. You have to know what happened to him in the past to understand what the future might bring if he isn't stopped. But that doesn't mean every story is the same. You get to spend time and meet different characters. You understand what they care about, what worries them, what they like to do. And of course, this is a video game. Every one of them feels and controls differently. They might go through the same places, but they feel different, and the things that happen there are different for every character. This doesn't only expand playtime, but it also allows you to understand this world a lot better. And the character songs are so good. We should just turn this video into a karaoke video and scrap everything else. Somebody will be waiting for me, so I have gotta fly higher. But not everyone liked all the stories in Sonic Adventure, blah blah, let's fix it up a bit. Sonic Adventure 2, there you go. Only 2 stories and each of them has 3 characters you can play as. This game definitely has a more focused story it wants to tell. And I believe that's perfect. I don't think either approach of the 2 adventure games is better than the other. I think they were planned with different objectives. Here, even though you go through similar levels in both stories that do reuse assets, they made an effort for each level to be unique. For example, it's obvious that Sonic and Shadow are running through very near places when they're going through Green Forest and White Jungle, but they are taking different routes to escape. Is it all more linear? It totally is. It didn't have as much development time as the first game, so they couldn't fit in a hub world this time. But it also managed to deliver a much easier to digest experience. Again, not better, both are interesting paths to pick. But the next game, Sonic Heroes, congrats on that Guinness World Record for most playable characters in a platforming game. But did you really need 4 stories where you go through the same stages in the same order with such minor differences? I understand wanting to go back to the roots of Sonic games with a more linear approach, but you could have just made the order of the levels different for each team. Does that make it harder to develop? Yeah, no doubt, but the game would have benefited from it. The story in this game was more simplistic. At least it did have its own twist, even if it's really obvious. The teams have their own stories to tell, but this time you don't become as connected with the specific character stories as you did in Sonic Adventure. Oh, Team Chaotix has to pay rent! Let's go do our job! Actually, this might be more relatable than I thought. please consider subscribing when you finish watching. It's super cool when the 12 characters reunite at the end of the game though. That's an epic gaming moment. Then we got Chad! Oh gosh, how about we talk about Sonic Battle instead? That game has multiple stories. Alright, I can't talk about it. I haven't beaten that one yet. Well, Shadow the Hedgehog is a game that makes things unnecessarily hard for the player. This time, you only play as Shadow, and focus on discovering the truth about his past. They give you the choice to do so by doing good or evil actions, except psych, you only have the illusion of choice. You're gonna have to get the 10 different endings that are available for you to unlock the final story and actually get to the end of this. There's some plot points that are kind of interesting during the different ways you can play this, but most of it is just okay. And there's a lot of what-if scenarios. People tell you over and over how you should do what they want you to do, and you deal with that until you get to the end. And beating the game's neutral story is really easy, but some of the hero and dark missions are downright unbearable. I always talk about Lost Impact because everyone should know before playing this that finding every artificial chaos in that level is a living nightmare. I've gone through it, I've earned my gamer badge, but the emotional scars won't go away. There's also some smaller games that take advantage of this multiple campaign method of telling a story. The Sonic Riders series tells very good stories for a hoverboard racing game. Except 3 riders! Sonic Rush makes the mystery of who Blaze is very interesting, and getting to see her find herself during the game is very sweet. Of the Rivals games, I've only finished the first one, and let's just say it suffers from the Sonic Hero syndrome. The second one looks like it does too, but don't quote me on that, I don't really know. Nevertheless, there's a game I think did this better than any other. Sonic the Hedgehog 06. I know what you're thinking, and I'm speaking in concept. I've always liked the concept of what 06 offers. It's not a finished game, and I know the state it came out in is unacceptable. Regardless, I don't think it's wrong for me to leave that fact aside when I'm playing it, so that I can have a nice time appreciating what Sonic Team was trying to do. And in terms of organizing how the campaigns worked, I loved it. I believe it found a great middle ground between Adventure 1 and Adventure 2. Every campaign you play has its own very specific story for you to know about, just like in Sonic Adventure 1. But there's still somewhat of a linear, overarching story that all the stories are quite focused on telling you about. The stories just feel a bit more separate because there's a lot of main stuff to talk about this time. It's at a grander scale. And the 3 main characters you play as are hedgehogs, meaning that everything feels relevant. I love how Adventure 1 built on some smaller scale stories, but 06 was trying to keep up the stakes the whole time and be really epic. I appreciate that, but that's not all. It still allowed you to play as some of the other characters inside levels. There's even some levels where you start as Sonic, for example, and then play as Eggman as Tails. Sadly, these gameplay styles, and even the main gameplay styles, weren't refined. And the story also has some weird stuff they should have worked more on. But I still wish they had tried a similar formula after this game instead of just giving up. Sonic Unleashed is basically my favorite game. Well, I'm not sure yet if I prefer Unleashed or Frontiers. I need to replay both titles. Tell me if you want to see me do that on stream. But from that game onward, we've mainly just been getting Sonic as a playable character, and I feel like that's been hurting gameplay and story variety ever since. Even when we've had other characters recently like the Avatar in Forces or Sonic's friends in Frontiers Final Horizon and Dream Team, they've just given us variations of Sonic's gameplay style. I like not losing speed, but I also like when different characters feel different. I think they're trying to find a middle ground between having Sonic's friends back and not making that a drag for casual players. As always, they're trying to make everyone happy, but will that be possible? Only time will tell. And as for the stories, I feel bringing different points of view to them forced Sonic Team to look at what they were telling us from different points of view, making the narrative a little more complex and interesting to pay attention to. Frontiers managed to do that before bringing different characters into the mix, but imagine if they went above and beyond with that. I hope future titles bring multiple stories back. And that's where Sonic Cross Shadow Generations comes in. It's been stated that Shadow's new campaign in this remaster will happen at the same time as Sonic's adventure through time and space. Even though time doesn't exist there. That's not the point. This means we are not only going to see Shadow's past story be revisited, but we're also getting Shadow's perspective about how he got dragged into the whole Time Meter mess and how he ended up at Sonic's birthday party. How cool is that? The story in Sonic Generations had an interesting premise that wasn't very well taken advantage of in the original release. I hope this changes things a little bit. And if it doesn't, don't worry about it. I'll make sure they do better next time. By making a video review and tagging Sega on Twitter so that they can hear what I have to say. Now time to make some eggs and bacon. Do you think Sonic's stories benefited from having multiple campaigns? Which was your favorite approach to this way of telling a story? How do you feel they could improve on this? Tell me in the comments and I'll be sure to answer some of you. By the way, I made a dedicated Twitter account for this YouTube channel. Follow me there so that we can stay in touch. I already had a Twitter account, but yeah, that's in Spanish, maybe not ideal, huh? Please subscribe for more Sonic content like this if you don't want my storyline to be like the chaotic storyline. Struggling to pay rent.